following program on Ada Derana 24 is classified for general audience. It is intended for all ages. It contains little or no violence, no strong language, and little or no sexual dialogue or situations. The following program contains opinions of the participants and does not reflect the views and beliefs of the Derana Media Network. The network believes in a safe space for all ideas to be expressed and on its duty to create such a platform for free speech. Viewer discretion is strictly advised. For a real view, real opinion, and for an honest conversation, it's time to Get Real with Mahieash Johnney. Tonight, coming to you from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Get Real, where we talk to notable newsmakers here at home and abroad. And this time around, we have a treat tonight. One of the most important minds of our time in terms of economy is joining me today, and they're apparently, initially I thought they were part of the whole Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi's crew, but they specifically told me they had nothing to do with that. But apparently the timing has been, I don't know. But here we are. We've been. I think you're not a stranger to our channel. You have been having programs with us, but not in person. So I'm honored to sit right across to you and have this conversation, both of you, Professor. Let me introduce Professor Jayati Ghosh. Of course, she is very well known. She has written a lot of articles. She is currently the Professor of Economics at the University of Massachusetts in the USA, Amherst. And also prior to that, she was at the Center for Economic Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. Welcome to the program, madam, and thank you very much for taking the time. I know it has been a busy schedule, but somehow we managed to make it.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much. And also on my left, another economic mind that has always been, driving up the hill. And giving a lot of information in terms of our part of the world, Professor C.P. Chandrasekhar. He is the Global Director of Research at the International Development Economic Association. He also taught for more than 3 decades at the Center for Economic Studies and Planning at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. So, colleagues, are your colleagues at the university? Welcome, Professor, to the program. So let me start off with you. We are just hot out of the oven of the visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi here in Sri Lanka. Suddenly it happened. There are conversations about as to why he came here. Yes, of course, he opened a few things that that India has been supporting in Sri Lanka. So let me start off with you, Professor Chandrasekhar. In terms of Sri Lanka's relationship with India and this particular visit, what do you think that what exactly is the outcome of this might be? Is there a message that we have to slowly take in right now?
Well, I suppose it's always been the case. I mean, we are neighbors, and there's also a strategic interest. There's a competition with China in terms of being able to have some kind of an influence relationship, whatever you want to call it. Geography and population makes India a big brother, so that is a problem.
But if that's not a problem per se, but it's actually
Yeah. So, but the point is, I'm unable to make out what really has come out of this visit as yet, because from whatever little one has been reading of of what's come out in the media. But in terms of an actual provision of some kind of support, basically it's it's a small reduction in the interest rate and converting 100 million. I mean, the peak of it, I think Sri Lanka's external debt was 51 or in the range of 50 plus billion. So what is 100 million? 100 million wouldn't even cover interest payments for 1 year. It would be less than that. So, I don't know what really has transpired in terms of offering support to Sri Lanka at a point of time when it's trying to recover from the crisis it had been through. On the other hand, there are indications that India has got something out of it in the solar power sector. I don't know what the defense deal implies. Strategically.
Suddenly, that was actually a surprise because nobody was expecting that. In terms of I want to talk about the whole what's happening in the world and also how our region is reacting to this, because I think our region is going to take a real brunt of that entire economic crisis that is to come with Donald Trump, shaking the entire global economic policies and all around the world. In a situation like that, now Sri Lanka's continuous worshipping of the IMF and its plan and not looking for other avenues. How do you see that? Is that a prudent move to make, or?
Well, it's definitely not prudent. I mean, the fact that Sri Lanka, I think it's the 17th time with the IMF. 18th time, I'm sorry. So if and we know of countries where they've been there 24 times and so on. So if that is any indication of the record of the IMF, its programs, which it actually ensures that governments adopt, of course, through letters of intent of their own, have not worked. I mean, that's the reason. Otherwise, if it had worked, we shouldn't have had another debt crisis after the heavily indebted poor countries initiative or the MDRI, etc. So and which was supported by the IMF or led partly by the IMF. So there's no indication whatsoever that it works. Now, on the other hand, you can say that unfortunately it represents the interests of the leading metropolitan powers, in particular the United States, which has a veto as far as decision making in the IMF is concerned, given the voting structure. So you need to engage with it because by treaty you entered into this relationship, but you have to increasingly try to push to engage with it at your terms. And the advantage which Sri Lanka or the Sri Lankan government had at this moment is that it had social sanction because it had actually been elected to power
with a massive mandate.
With a massive mandate, and a mandate which actually was backing a program, which was to say that what the IMF had prescribed is actually going to be extremely damaging for the people at large, and is not going to either resolve the balance of payments problem or the debt crisis, or is not even going to restore growth. And it's going to somehow find a way of actually ensuring that private bondholders, partly financed through deals with the bilateral creditors, and partly by putting huge amount of pressure on consumption and on generating a domestic recession to release some to save some foreign exchange which can be used to pay off the bondholders. So if that is the intent, it's basically something which is trying to restore the confidence of bondholders because of the fact that it's accepted by the Institute of International Finance, etc., as being the police person that they would like to use in the world economy. It's very clear what they were going to do. So you can say that, okay, international inequality forces me to accept something, but you had the sanction. So I do think that there was a possibility, there still is a possibility, and hopefully
let's wait and see. Professor Jayati Ghosh, I want to come to you. You wrote an article back in 2023, The Schizophrenia at the IMF, which is a very interesting article. I suggest each and everyone who's watching, please go and read this, because it is very vital that you understand how these organizations work and what their real intentions are. It is not about taking care of you and me. It never has been. It is about, there is a bigger global agenda and we're just pawns in this entire saga. Professor Jayati Ghosh, let me ask you this question now. In 2022, when our economic crisis came into place, the biggest issue was a balance of payment issue, that basically we didn't have the dollars to pay for services. But then the IMF, we were told by the neoliberal mindsets here in Sri Lanka, the think tanks specifically, go to the IMF, go to the IMF, go to the IMF. So apparently we were at their feet asking for help. they came up with a program. So when you actually cut down all the areas into this program and look into each and every sector, it does not address the balance of payment crisis. Okay, it addresses, it tells you to do la-di-da stuff on the other side, but never on the issue we really had. How come what do you think is the reason, like when you have a problem, when you're having a headache, you're treating your liver for something completely different? That is exactly what this IMF program seems to me. Am I right or am I wrong about this?
I mean, I think it's quite clear, as Chandra was saying, that the IMF program is essentially designed ultimately to protect the interests of private bondholders and private capital, but also the interests of the elite in Sri Lanka. And I think there is the answer to your question. Why did Sri Lanka choose that? Because in fact it was ruled by an elite that wanted to protect its own interests and those of global capital. We were hoping, and we still hope, that in fact a government that has a mandate not to do that will actually deliver on that mandate, because it's not necessary. And it definitely, as you said, it doesn't just not help the people of Sri Lanka, the wage earners and the pensioners and others, but it actually damages the economy as a whole. So yes, there was an opportunity then, but if ever there was an opportunity, it's right now. Because right now we know that the global rules of the game have been blown up.
Yeah.
That whether you like it or not, the Sri Lankan economy is going to be badly affected. And it doesn't matter if you can renegotiate the tariffs down from 42% to 36% or some minor concession.
You're talking about the Trump tariffs.
That is, you know, what has happened now is that there is so much global uncertainty that there is going to be a global recession. Sri Lanka will be hit. Your exports will be affected. Your foreign exchange remittances will be affected. Your tourist earnings will be affected. Capital flows will be affected. So you have to recognize that. Whether you like it or not, this is going to happen to you. And trying to be good and placate global capital is not going to help you. You have to have a plan B, and it has to be a very workable plan B.
And that's where my question comes once again. And this is not a question that I am raising just to you. I have raised this question to the Economic Development Minister, who sat right there where you're seated. I have asked this from the Deputy Finance Minister, same position. I have asked this the same question from the Digital Minister, the current one, not the old ones. And every single person says, no, we have other plans, but then nothing is being, like for a simple example, this entire visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi here in Sri Lanka, and it is such a hush, very swiftly put together visit. It was never planned, never in the works. And we know that in the onset, yes, it is all nice smiles and everything, but you know, underneath there is something else that might later on we will find out. So in a situation like that, for Sri Lanka, like you're telling, yes, this is going to happen, the tsunami is going to come from this side, because you know, Donald Trump has created the waves. So if that is the case, where should we be looking at the areas of what our economic strength is and what we can do to help make sure that our top, let's say the 60%, the people who are going to get affected, what are our alternatives?
You know, I think first of all you have to stop looking outside. I think that's the critical part. Always Sri Lanka has been seen as that all its growth has to come essentially from exports, which is wrong. In fact, you are
tourist.
now, or tourism. Basically, you're looking outside for your revenues. You should be thinking of yourself as a lower middle income economy, which has some tremendous potential to expand its domestic market. So you should be thinking, for example, of expanding social services in a way that reaches everyone, because it's also employment generating. You should be thinking of a package for agriculture that enables sustainable agriculture to small cultivators. You should be thinking of small and medium enterprises that are being battered like anything. Again, a package for them that enables proper, good quality employment in these. Now, all of this, of course, requires money. And immediately they will turn around and say, oh, but we have no money, we have no revenues. You are not taxing the rich. The extremely rich who did not pay a penny throughout all of this period of crisis. You are not taxing extreme wealth, which is possible to tax. Now there are many middle-income countries doing it. It's possible. We also have data about, we know where they're stashing the money. So you should begin by taxing extreme wealth, like people who have more than $10 million in financial wealth. Tax that at 2%. You can tax the extreme high-level consumption, which I can see all around me in Colombo right now. You can tax that at very high rates. You can tax luxury second homes. I mean, there's a whole range of things you can tax. Tax the people who have not been affected by the crisis, who have actually gotten away scot-free when people have suffered, and generate the revenues to do the things that will build up the economy as a whole.
And those are?
Those are, as I mentioned, those are agriculture, sustainable agriculture for smallholders, small-scale enterprises, protect the garment workers, protect the plantation workers, and ensure that health, education, basic services are provided in a decent way, because that's employment generating. That also helps women who are freed from a whole lot of care responsibilities because of the fact that you will have creches, elderly care, etc., and enable them to actually also find decent employment opportunities.
Professor Jayati Ghosh, Professor Chandrasekhar, you also wrote an article recently saying that Sri Lanka's debt restructuring a win for the private bondholders, which I 100% agree. It is never taking care about Sri Lankan people and our the middle income and the low income class. They are going to get battered. Austerity measures are kicking in, and people are still not feeling it the way it should be, like I think Greece felt it. Do you think it's going to be that bad? Because one of the things that has been told to us by our government, previous government, and all these economic pundits is, we swiftly made a turnaround. Look how quickly we made this turnaround. We were bad in 2022, and within 2024 we have turned everything around and we are on the path towards growth. Central Bank is coming up and saying 5% growth during the last quarter of 2024. So all this rosy picture, everything is fine, but here we are, we're talking about something else. Who's lying, basically?
Well, there are two things here. First of all, if you go deep down into the trough, then even a small recovery, there's a base effect. Even a small recovery, if you say I've got 5% growth, you got 5% growth from where? After having gone deep down there. That's one. Secondly, these kinds of adjustment strategies have differential impacts on different sections of the population. So maybe there's some people who are doing okay at the moment, but those people constitute a small percentage of Sri Lanka's population. They don't really constitute the working people, the peasants, and so on and so forth. So I think we need to, we need to be not be taken up too much just about what's happening on the surface in cities like Colombo, but really look at the data and the information to the extent that it becomes available, of what's really happening with the large mass, the people, the working people, as I said. The second thing is, this has been, Sri Lanka, we must recognize, is the second country in the world in which new experiment with adjustment has been undertaken.
With the IMF.
With the IMF.
Yeah.
This is what was the crisis? The crisis was an external payments crisis. The lack of foreign exchange to be able to service debt, which you have to service in foreign exchange. Now, when the adjustment comes, you actually say that no, you shouldn't restructure only external debt. Mm-hmm. You also have to restructure domestic debt.
Yeah, exactly.
So now there's only Ghana and Sri Lanka. This has never in the past been part of IMF adjustment strategies. It's a whole new way of trying to say that we need to actually just find money, independent of whether it's foreign exchange or whether it's domestic currency, without actually stating that, listen, having domestic currency doesn't help unless you can transform it into foreign currency.
Exactly.
So we have to ask ourselves the question, why are they pushing for this? Because it basically means you're hitting the pensioners.
Yeah.
In Ghana's case, you hit the commercial banks. In Sri Lanka's case, commercial banks were in such a bad position that the central bank actually said, listen, we can't actually get the commercial banks to take a haircut.
And then they went for the EPF fund.
Yeah, exactly. They were only pen fund. Now, the only way, at least I think the only way we can understand this is, if at all it's going to have an effect, and I don't think it's going to actually deliver that foreign exchange, the only way it delivers this foreign exchange is say that, you see, earlier the sort of strike was to say, cut government expenditure, cut social security, raise electricity prices.
Balance the budget.
Yeah, balance the budget so that you actually have a situation in which you have a certain, you put down the economy, you depress the economy, in order to actually reduce income, and at any lower level of income, given a certain amount of imports associated with the unit of GDP, if your GDP is held down, your imports will come down, release a little bit of foreign exchange, assuming that your exports don't fall, release a little bit of foreign exchange and use it to pay off the bondholders, the private lenders, the commercial banks, etc. Now what you're saying is, I mean, we recognize that that's not enough. We need a double whammy. So we not only need to actually use a reduction in public expenditure on the basis of the fact that you just are going to say that we'll have an adjustment strategy. You're going to say that, okay, you're going to actually have a reduction of government debt, which will force people to say that, listen, if I had a target perception of what my savings is going to be when I retire, and suddenly I realize it's going to be 70% of that, what will I do? I'll cut consumption today to save more, because when I retire, I don't have an income. So you're actually going to have you're going to have a deep recession in order to generate a little bit of foreign exchange ostensibly.
Which I really don't understand. This is Professor Ghosh. You also can jump in here. What I don't understand is this. Okay, so we were importing unnecessarily. Okay, we never thought about our local market. We never thought about, this was not happening within the past 2-3 years. It's been happening for constant, like about 30-40 years since the time we opened the market. This is what we have been told to do. It's easy to import rather than to manufacture it here. Now this is the free market thinking of the the global West, and they were telling us to do this. We did that. And so what happens, from every single thing, from a toothbrush to a toilet paper or to every single thing was brought in. We keep paying, sending the dollars out. And now suddenly COVID came, again another crisis, completely flattened us to a level that we cannot even rise the way we used to. Now in a situation like that, IMF comes and tells, okay, the first issue, and like you just said, if that is the case, what we'll do is we'll shut the doors. We are not going to bring in. We may have to. This is what you would do at a home. Exactly. If I'm a house, at my own home, if I'm not getting the income, first thing I'll do is, cut consumption. Now, first thing that these guys are telling us, no, open the markets again, bring in more, you can't do that. How can you do that? What is the baseline here of understanding this completely contradictory solution that they are telling us?
Well, this is basically what I had said when I was talking about the schizophrenia of the IMF. Because the IMF does things for us, for developing countries that approach it in desperation, which are pro-cyclical, which add to the downturn, which make things worse. Yeah? Whereas for the rich countries, they typically actually recognize the need for counter-cyclical. So in the US, when the US had the big global financial crisis, the IMF says openly, you have to spend more. You have to put more money in the hands of the people. You have to ensure that consumption doesn't fall. In other words, exactly the opposite. And so as I said, it's really a question of understanding whose interests it serves. But I want to go back to that other point you made. Again, the opportunity still exists for the Sri Lanka government, because let's face it, free trade is dead, right? It's been blown into the water. This is a time where you say, well, we crack down on non-essential imports. As luxury cars, I'm seeing so many new showrooms for luxury cars. Put
and now we are opening the ban in this month.
Put 500% import duty, at least collect some money from this. And the guys who can pay for those luxury cars will probably buy them anyway, for all you know. But at least you will get some revenue out of it. But also crack down on a whole range of non-essential imports, because you will need to conserve foreign exchange right now. You are not going to get more export revenues in the near future, for the end of this year, for sure. You can't pretend that if you go and beg and plead with the Trump administration and even offer him a hotel somewhere here or there, that you will necessarily benefit. This year is going to be bad. So begin now. Conserving.
Is that bad for Sri Lanka, or is it bad for global?
Globally it's bad, and Sri Lanka is going to be among those affected. And it will not help if you just try and reduce your own tariffs. That's not going to save you. So recognizing that, respond to that crisis. Cut on non-essential imports, revive your own domestic economy as a result with some of the small-scale industries, and operate on the basis of a domestic market that has potential to grow.
Absolutely. I mean, such an interesting conversation, and finally some making sense, because trust me, professors, I have been sitting in this chair and interviewing people giving me A grade BS, and it is very hard to sit and listen to that. But then again, I'm so happy to have this conversation. But before that, we want to continue, but we want to take a short commercial break. You're watching Get Real. I mean, conversation with Professor Jayati Ghosh and also Professor Chandrasekhar, economist. I mean, we're glad that they are from our region here in Sri Lanka, but they're they're working currently in the United States, advising many governments and many institutions with regard to how economy will keep changing as we move on, and what kind of solutions, just like Professor Jayati Ghosh just said. Let's take a short commercial break. You're watching Get Real. We'll be back. Welcome back, everyone, to Get Real. I'm in conversation with Professor Jayati Ghosh and also Professor Chandrasekhar. Both of them are economic professors. Professor Jayati Ghosh is currently with the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, United States, and also Professor Chandrasekhar is the Global Director of Research for the International Development Economic Association, IDEA. Let me start off with you, Professor Ghosh. Now, you said, you gave the warnings, the Trump tariffs are going to create the ripples, and that is going to be felt all around the world, and Sri Lanka is going to be one of that. Okay, now we don't have a plan. That's the reality of it. We're going with the IMF plan, and then somebody will blame someone and something will happen. But the reality will start to strike in 2027 when we are asked to pay back our loans. What people are still completely have forgotten about is we're not paying our loans. The loans that we are due to pay to our bondholders, the countries, that is not happening. It is happening in a very small amount, but not the real payments that needs to go through. That is going to happen in 2027. So now Trump's economic plan and this entire bulldozing of global economics, what he's doing currently in the United States, and also Sri Lanka is a victim of that. Now, not exactly a victim. I mean, Trump is taking care of America, which he's supposed to do because he's the American president. But our president, our government is not thinking in that. They are thinking in terms of regional, political, all that kind of thing, not the people of Sri Lanka. So 2027, what do you see if by any chance if we don't change? We don't have a proper plan in place to understand, and more importantly, a plan that would absorb the shocks that's going to come in. What will happen in 2027 when we are asked to pay back?
I don't even want to think about it. It is a disaster. And in fact, it's a disaster that is unfolding already. And it's a disaster not just in terms of the massive shortage of foreign exchange that you would likely face, but also that's also when the pension funds get affected. That's when the hit comes to pensions from 28 onwards, I think.
Yeah.
And that's when suddenly these garment workers and plantation workers and others who have been putting in a lot of money, sometimes enforced because of the whole social security system, are going to discover that their pensions are worth, as you said, 70% of what they were worth. And that's another damning kind of indictment of the whole economic policy. So I don't even want to think about what would happen if you don't change.
Solution
In fact, is not just have a plan for the future. Begin now. Begin now, because the world has changed, and you recognize that the world economy has changed. You recognize that there will be a battering, so you respond to that battering. In other words, your crisis response has to be embedded in the plan. And that crisis response means that the earlier rules do not apply. I mean, I don't know how they want to do it formally. It doesn't matter whether you renegotiate with the IMF or not. Right now, you have to change your economic policy. And then you go to the IMF and say, we have to change our economic policy. Because, I'm sorry,
and
the world
if
changed.
By any chance, if we are to change our economic policy, what kind of economic policy should this be? I understand there should be a lot of importance given towards the local market and internal growth, which you earlier mentioned. Is that enough?
No, but I mean, let's put it this way. It has to be a package, right? So you have to think externally. How do you conserve foreign exchange? I've already mentioned that. How do you generate new markets? You have to get into now pacts that will perhaps allow you trade diversion in a meaningful way for new markets for your exports. But also then you have to think of taxation. You have to change the structure of taxation away from the very regressive revenue raising, which is currently going on, to progressive, to taxing extreme wealth, to taxing ultra-rich consumption, which is also, by the way, environmentally more desirable, etc. So you have to do it on the fiscal policy. You have to change the monetary policy to actually make sure that small micro enterprises get credit at least on the same rates that the rich guys are getting.
Professor Chandrasekhar, if we start to do that, there's going to be a backlash from the whole top elitists. They're going to say, we're going to pull out our businesses, because they said that in 2020 when COVID hit. When we told them, you have to do A, B, C, D, and you got to, pitch in, the first thing that they did was they cut jobs. They basically told people to leave, we can't sustain you. So these are like companies who have existed for more than 100 years in Sri Lanka, so wealthiest companies in Sri Lanka. And they did that. The backlash, in a situation like that, what are we to think? Yeah, I mean, both of y'all can...
Can I just quickly come in on that? Is that, let's face it, job losses are going to happen anyway. Garment sector is massively hit. You're going to get job losses in garments. You're going to get job losses in a range of export industries, right? It's not, whether they threaten it or not, they are going to happen. The question is, how do you respond to that? So it's not just a question of preserving the jobs that exist, but finding other opportunities, including in small and medium enterprises and in viable agriculture. That's why I'm emphasizing the things where you can do something within your domestic economy.
So, like, domestic consumption when it comes to our food, the food security is going to be very important. And then again, also the small and medium sector that has to be given a little bit of, not a handout, but a process to grow. Because I think one of the biggest hit, like I have the person, the lady who is running the small and medium enterprises, that particular association, Professor Chandrasekhar, she was here screaming her gut out, saying, we are bleeding money. Okay, we don't know what to do right now, because the banks are coming with parade laws. They are trying to take, because of the simple fact that we can't meet your loan payments, we need a little bit of a break. We're not asking for a handout. They specifically said that. We don't want money like, but just give us a little bit of a break and an area so that we can actually little by little grow and come to the point where we can contribute back to the economy. In a situation like that, Professor Chandrasekhar, what do you think that this government should be really doing right now? Because in terms of solutions, because we understand the problem, we understand the problem, I don't know whether our government does, but what should, like little things that they can do right now so that, it'll have a bigger impact?
Well, okay, let's look at it this way. Supposing we break this into three parts. Part one, there's immediately a demand, a need, no, I wouldn't even say a demand, but a need to actually support a set of people who were hit by a crisis and are still being damaged or suffering the damage of that crisis. So you need to be able to generate resources which can actually support them, as you say, to bring them back to a situation where they are in a position to be able to then contribute productively and help move the economy forward. So that's number one. Number two, it's very clear that you need to save as much foreign exchange as possible, because you cannot add to your deficit in sums which, when, as you say, you begin to pay your big payments. It's not that there's going to be no payments, because I mean, the multilaterals are not going to allow you
no free meal.
Yeah, so there's going to be some payments, but there's going to be a bunching of payments after a certain period of time. By that time, you should have saved as much foreign exchange as possible. So you need to think of ways, or you'll do that. And the third thing is, of course, that you need to think of actually having a new growth strategy which combines an ability to be able to earn foreign exchange with sustaining growth without it being too import intensive. That's because you can't get yourself into this trouble again. So supposing we take these three, I think as far as the first one is concerned, I think Jayati has already put this on the table. Let's look at who took a sacrifice at the point of time when the crisis occurred. The people took the sacrifice.
Yeah.
Did the elite take a big sacrifice? They didn't. So actually you're in a situation where you say, okay, everybody has to take a sacrifice because of the fact that, even Trump is saying, listen, there's going to be some pain. I mean, I'm doing this for your future. But there's going to be some pain. So be ready for this pain. He's declaring. So we know there's going to be some pain. There's going to be some job losses. But when we need the money to be able to protect people in a situation when they're going through this pain, which has started much earlier, who do we call upon in this current environment from within the economy to take a sacrifice? Those who sacrifice less at the point of time of the crisis, even though they would be the ones who contributed most to generating that crisis. So she mentioned wealth tax. I think we need a wealth tax combined with an inheritance tax. You need sin taxes and you need significantly large consumption on
taxes. France has exit taxes. So if you want to take your money out, you have to pay an exit tax.
That is a thing that we actually have to bring in, because most of the money that is being generated outside, like for a simple example, the apparel sector is one of the biggest sectors that is contributing to our economy, to our GDP. But what keeps happening, and nobody's talking about this, is
that they don't bring it back.
They don't bring it back.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Because most of these, the labor is from Sri Lanka, the resources are from Sri Lanka, the thinking is from Sri Lanka, the production is from Sri Lanka, and then they sell it to all these international markets to higher rates. These are not small, these are luxury brands. And then they go and park the money elsewhere. Why? When we ask the question, the simple answer is, oh no, it's very volatile to keep it in Sri Lanka. What they don't understand is the very reason you're keeping it outside is the volatility is
generating volatility.
Yeah, exactly. So they don't understand that.
And some of this,
and they don't care.
Some of it is not even declared because there can be over invoicing and under invoicing, which we know
you can fix.
Yeah, and
which you can now fix.
Yeah, the point is, it's not only that agencies like the IMF, save markets and so on and so forth. It's not that they want the state to actually engineer redistribution of income in favor of global capital. I mean, that's what they want to do. This is not real markets. This is actually the state playing a role. But the point is, it's the other aspect of the IMF is that even though it says that we have to do a little bit of taxation here and there, etc., they want regulatory forbearance. They claim that you shouldn't be a state which is breathing over these innovators who are going to actually help your economy. And that regulatory forbearance is what allows people to not bring back the foreign exchange, which is partly generating the crisis. So that's the second thing. If you basically say that the second thing should be that we should save foreign exchange in the interim, we save foreign exchange how? We reduce import-intensive luxury consumption. We force people to bring back the dollars that they earn on the basis of domestic resources and domestic labor and the benefits which the state gives them in order to be able to in the zones, in the export processing zones, etc. So you need to actually, you need to basically say that the IMF might want you to squeeze your people's income, but what you want to do is to squeeze the expenditure of foreign exchange to the maximum extent possible and release some foreign exchange and bring back the foreign exchange which is legitimate.
There's going to be pushback from the IMF. The whole idea is this, that this is what Professor is boiling my mind, because I'm not an economist, I'm a layman, I'm a citizen of Sri Lanka. My entire field is media. From small days, from school, I've been studying media. But I have these conversations, I research, I look into it. Now, Sri Lanka's problem is with regard to, the reason for to go to the IMF is our economic structures are not sustaining the growth of this country. It is basically, there are so much of holes leaking out in various points of. Fine. Okay, so then it is, if we understand those little holes, then we can go and plug it up and, you know, close it and bring it back. Now, organizations like IMF was told the reason that we have to go to them is because once you go to them, we get the credibility that our economy is safe for investment. Okay, this is what we are. I don't know which hotels you guys are staying in, but there's a pile of sand right in front of the Golf Face Green here in Sri Lanka, which is called the Port City, which has been there since 2015, which was supposed to be a gift from China, and that is seated there. That is supposed to be our financial beacon of, you know, hope and prosperity. One more thing that I can't understand, like India is doing this in a different way. The Mumbai that was there like about 10 years back is not the Mumbai that you can recognize right now. It is completely different. So I mean, they are looking outside, and they are looking, basically selling us your internal growth towards the world. The world is actually their customer, so everything is coming back into your country, and that's why India is, you know, in a higher situation, and where we are talking about that India will become one of the you know, the leading economies in the world. But in a situation like that, when we have that, how does, now we've been in the IMF program for many years, the confidence is not still being rectified, because that is just a joke, because we keep telling that the only thing we can do is we can go and borrow more money, which will increase our debt. And then I don't understand the logic.
But the IMF's program also says that you'll go back to the market to borrow in
exactly.
It's all about just being more and more indebted.
I mean, like, you're not coming, you're a beggar.
Yes.
And you continuously be a beggar up until these, I don't know, 10, 15 generations. They'll be beggars.
And the plan is to have a bigger board.
And the point is, we you know, I would like not to say beggar, because a lot of the borrowing which the state did through the sovereign bonds was not, you didn't need that money. You didn't need that foreign exchange. I mean, God knows what was being built with that money. But it was not something which was actually contributing to productive transformation of this.
It wasn't cheap.
It wasn't cheap.
Much higher coupon rates than anywhere else in the world. So in fact, you were actually paying more than you should have for that very expensive debt. No, but the point is also this, that as long as you do not change your growth strategy, this is basically what you are letting yourself in for. But here is not just a government that has come with a mandate to change it, but a global situation that says, sorry, that whole route is over. So if you do not read the signals now, then when? I mean, you have to change the growth strategy, because the global economy is going to
go in this same particular path, there'll be another 2022 like crisis for Sri Lanka to face?
Yes.
Without a doubt.
No question about it.
And what would that mean? Like, are we looking at a situation like, I mean, like, touch wood, like Zimbabwe?
Put it this way, there is no reason for you to get into this crisis. If, in fact, the government decides that, yes, we have a mandate to change, we have a global economy that is anyway collapsing and will allow us to do those changes.
So, Professor, let me ask you this question. You said, look at other avenues. Now, our usual culprits of exports, Professor, is basically we get income from tourism. 2019 taught us a lesson, Easter attacks, plane load after load left, zero tourism. COVID also taught us, it hasn't learned any lesson on that. And the others are apparel sector. These are like been there for many years. You're talking about digitizing Sri Lanka, economic revival through digitalization and all that kind of thing. Still has not, you know, come to a point where we can. But there are companies in Sri Lanka that is actually earning a lot of money, like again parked elsewhere, not brought into this country. And then on top of it, we have those kinds of, you know, our usual places of dealing with things like the United States, the Europe, GSP Plus, we are begging for that. And on this side, China and all that they say. We have not even thought about going to Africa. We have not thought about South America. We have not thought about East Asia. We have not thought about any of those countries. And here we are thinking about, you know, new avenues. Do you think that's what we have to start doing?
I mean, first of all, I would say reduce dependence on exports for the growth of the economy. But within exports, definitely diversify. If you look at the past decade of growth, most of the growth in global exports has come from other emerging markets and developing economies. It's not come from the US and Europe. Those have been declining, or Japan or Korea. It has really come from other parts of the developing world. And so,
like?
Well, dominantly Southeast Asia, Middle East, Latin America. But Africa is likely to become larger and larger. Also because Africa is now operating much more as a continent.
Yeah.
It's actually developing an African market rather than just individual domestic markets. So there is, and of course demography in that sense favors it, right? More and more young people entering the labor force if they can find jobs. But as a result, Africa is going to become a very important market. And China has recognized this for a long time.
And that's why they're there.
But in fact, more than that, just the trade excluding China among these other emerging regions is the fastest growing in the world. That has already been the pattern. So if Sri Lanka doesn't tap into that, it's losing out on a huge opportunity.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that, to say that, see, the point is, in all what we've been saying, and you've chosen two people who agree with each other, so it's but
there's actually three people who agree with each other.
Yeah. So, but the point is, that it's very clear that, listen, you need exports, but you need exports not in the sense that you thought that this is going to make you, developed economy by 2050 or whatever it may be.
Singapore.
Singapore. So
exactly.
you need exports because of the fact that you need a certain amount of foreign exchange, because you're not, you can't be an autarkic country. You would have some imports which you have to finance. You would have some debt which you have to pay back in terms of foreign exchange. So you need some export revenue. Tourism, you need to diversify. So there, what we are saying is that, listen, find new ways of actually trying to sustain your imports at levels which you think are necessary. And then you need a growth strategy. The problem is, not only Sri Lanka, but all countries which were promised this El Dorado of being able to invade global markets and become the next South Korea or maybe the next Vietnam or the next China or whatever it may be. All of them are not on that boat anymore, and they didn't at all spend time thinking about other ways in which they can try to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps instead of depending on that market. So you need a growth strategy which actually puts incomes among people whose consumption will allow you to generate a vibrant, growing domestic market, which then provides the base for investment and growth over a period of time with its multiplier effects. So they are two different things. You need foreign exchange, of course, but there's a difference between needing foreign exchange and pursuing export-led growth. That's what she says is a no-no.
So once you stop thinking of export-led growth as your basic strategy, then you stop seeing wages as costs. You see rising wages, as a chance for your domestic market to grow.
Exactly. So that we will actually have people working here rather than going away for good salaries, and that is very important. Let's take a short commercial break. I'm in conversation with Professor Jayati Ghosh and also Professor Chandrasekhar. We have been talking a lot about the impending crises that Sri Lanka can face as we move on in this same path of IMF, and basically the government said 75 years they ruined our country, but then again apparently they chose to do the same thing. So I don't know how it works. Perhaps the minister can come back and explain it to me on that. Let's take a short commercial break. You're watching the show. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to Get Real. I'm in conversation with Professor Jayati Ghosh and also Professor Chandrasekhar. And just before we came on, they said they were working together with each other for more than 40 years. So these guys really know what they've been doing in terms of economics, and they're more or less, understanding our regional story, and not just, we don't have white people coming up and telling that, everything what we do is bad. these guys understand the need to eat rice, the need to eat, be South Asian, our culture and heritage, and how we can bring solutions based on that, because what fits to United States will never fit for us, which is a lesson most of us have not learned yet. Let me start off with you, Professor Chandrasekhar, with regard to, because we are running out of time, Trump tariffs. I understand what he's doing. I'm not against it because he's taking care of his country. It's important for him, and his argument is America has been used by the world like a bread basket. They just dip in whenever they want, but they never contribute back to the US, which is an argument I think all presidents around the world should be making on behalf of their country. Even our president should be doing exactly that. So in a situation like that, but with the fact that America being the dominant currency in trading and has a lot of impact in global economics, on this side we have China, right on top of us we have India. Now these are also global economic superpowers that is coming into play in this. Now there is a reciprocal tariff coming from China. Again, there'll be all these trade wars. Then there's this conversation about BRICS, which is also part of India. Our big brother is also part of that entire thing. That's a new form of thinking. Where do you think that Sri Lanka should align ourselves in order to make sure, first, to weather this crisis that is coming, second, to still keep growing, and to make sure that globally we are not isolated, we are also part of this entire whole conversation that is happening, and that people outside is not making decisions on behalf of us. We are in charge of our own decision making. So what exactly do you think we should be doing?
It's very difficult for a country like Sri Lanka to shape the world, as it were.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's I wouldn't say BRICS, but we've got a lot of initiatives which over a period of time we've seen in the Asian region. So we have the Chiang Mai initiative, multilateralized, which is supposed to actually be something which allowed countries which, like Sri Lanka or any other country in the region, which on occasion, 1997 it was even South Korea, on occasion can face foreign exchange liquidity problems, could go to this initiative and access this liquidity. But it's so odd that to access it, you have to be part of an IMF program, because they want the surveillance to be done by the IMF. So that's something which Asia has to sort out. They thought that they were trying to sort it out when they recommended the Asian Monetary Fund after the 1997 crisis, because the Japanese realized that the IMF does not understand the requirements of growth in this part of the world, and that therefore you needed our organization. But the only thing is, they made a mistake, that when the fund bank meetings were going on in Hong Kong, they had a meeting on the side, and they invited the bank, the IMF, and the US and the EU to come and attend that meeting, and they shot down the idea. They said, no, you can't do this, because you're going to completely disrupt your relationship. And partly Japan, which is so dependent on international markets.
Yeah.
So I think the only thing which we can say is that you must try and be part of the voice which is actually demanding that there should be a far greater degree of cooperation, not merely in terms of having regional markets and so on, which of course is important to diversify, but also in terms of being in a situation where if you have a liquidity problem, you don't have to rush to an entity which is nothing but an agent of international private finance capital. So that's the first thing. But the other thing we have to realize is that you can't anymore just be searching for markets to generate growth, which is what we are saying, that you need to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. That's the way, and that's what Sri Lanka can do. Sri Lanka can't change the shape of the international financial architecture.
Professor Jayati Ghosh, for let's say tomorrow our President Anura Kumara Dissanayake wakes up and thought, okay, I'm going to appoint Professor Jayati Ghosh as my economic advisor, and what would you advise the leader of our country, and beyond that, the rest of the nation as well, what should we be doing in order to face this crisis that is been brewing in the US, and now little ripples are coming all over the world?
So I think we've already talked about a bunch of specifics, so let me actually just be a bit more general and say that this period of global disorder, which we've been talking about, is not necessarily all bad. I mean, sure, there is bad stuff.
Opportunities
for sure.
are there.
And the opportunities are there for what reason? Because you don't have the rigid constraint of rules that didn't always benefit you. So, for example, earlier if you put import constraints on certain things, immediately everyone would say, oh, you can't do that, that's against the WTO, etc. I mean, the WTO is dead in the water right now, right? So, in fact, you can do lots of things that you didn't have the capacity to do before because everybody would be down on you. And similarly, the fact that there are all these competing powers now is bad at one level, but it's also an opportunity because you can play them off one against another. You don't have to align. You can say, well, actually no, so-and-so is offering me a better alternative. And that in turn means that Sri Lanka, if keeps its head, if the government actually has the confidence to say, well, we are going to approach this as a medium-sized economy that can actually choose different alternatives, gives it a tremendous strength, which it must realize. And the third is that it opens up very different kinds of alliances. Strategic alliances which are issue-based. There is a whole possibility of tax reform globally, and there is a whole range of countries that is very interested in making sure that multinationals pay the same rate of tax as domestic companies. At the moment, they get away with tiny amounts. There are countries in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia that are asking for this. It's time to get into a coalition with those. There are countries that are saying, we do want a wealth tax. We're going to share information on who's holding the wealth in different places, and we're going to impose that wealth tax. There's a possibility for combining on those. There are countries that are saying, look, we're looking for new trade arrangements because we can't rely on the existing ones. There are many different opportunities opening up. So I think it's important for the Sri Lankan government not to be stuck in the past, to say, oh, we need the US, we need the EU, so we will do everything we can to placate them. And to say, let's look at the evolving order. Let's look forward, let's look at how things are changing, and let's develop new alliances, new coalitions, issue-based. I'm not saying for everything. That will actually benefit the people of Sri Lanka.
Absolutely. Professor Chandra, I'll give you the last word. In terms of right now, free trade agreements is the way to go, that this government is thinking free trade agreements with Thailand, with all these countries. There's a lot of free trade agreements that is going on. With even China, we are trying to do that. The only problem that keeps happening is that apparently all their stuff comes here, none of our stuff goes there. So that disparity is there. Is that a prudent move?
It isn't, because we need regional cooperation, both in terms of sharing markets as well as in terms of, being able to generate scale, to scale investments, so which can be distributed across the region. The problem with free trade agreements is there are two aspects to it which we must recognize. One is they are corporate driven.
Yeah.
These are not free trade agreements which put people at the center. They are corporate driven. And the second thing is they're not just corporate driven. They are hugely influenced by templates which actually give the lead position to international capital, for foreign investors which want to enter these countries, because everybody thought that that's where our salvation lies, and we know that that is wrong. So we shouldn't go back to the earlier free trade agreements, the bilateral investment treaties, etc. We have to think of new ways of cooperation.
Final point, if I may, that
that's what it is.
That therefore also your response to Trump's tariffs should not be corporate driven. I feel at the moment it is possibly. It is very important to get the interests of other stakeholders in the economy in the response to the tariffs.
And also they should actually think more dialogue with that administration, because I don't think that is happening at the moment. We are not actively engaging with the United States in a manner that, in a way that not to ask for other things, but then again, like if you look at businesses, there is hardly any American businesses coming in Sri Lanka. There should be a cooperation that should happen with those businesses, so that there could be some kind of, a little bit of I'll scratch your back and you'll scratch mine kind of situation. That could happen. But
always with looking at the small print. Because the small print is where they kill you.
Exactly. I am really honored to have had this conversation, Professor Jayati Ghosh and also Professor Chandrasekhar. Thank you very much when you came here into Sri Lanka, for taking the time to come on the show
Thank you
and to
for
sit
having
down
us,
and
yeah.
have this conversation. It has been a pleasure and an honor for me personally to speak to wise minds of our times, and that who thinks beyond the whole neoliberal way of thinking. And I appreciate what you all have been doing, and I sincerely hope that you all will continue to do this. And when you all are here again, please make sure that you come back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. It's always a pleasure too.
Well, that's all the time we have for you tonight. I know it has been a treat for each and every one of you to hear these wise minds speak about our economy and our solutions. If you just heard, take this out of this conversation. It is not that hard to change. We can change as a nation, and we can redirect. It's just that we need the willpower of the people. Waiting for the politicians to do it is not going to happen. We did our part. We gave a mandate to a government, and apparently the government has chosen to go with the IMF path. Well, we all know that's not going to work, and when it doesn't go to work, instead of finding excuses, I think as Sri Lankans, we really need to find solutions for ourselves, our communities, our little villages. If we start have a mechanism there, I think we can actually come out of this crisis that is to come and be successful as well. Thank you very much for watching tonight. I really appreciate it. I'll see you next week on another episode of Get Real. See you then. Bye.
I'm coming back to you.